Happy Halloween! Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheyenne Blue. I'm a real estate agent over in Lake County, California, and today I am dressed as Queen of the Underworld, Persephone from Greek mythology. She also goes by Kor. She's the goddess of spring and also Hades' wife, and the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of harvest and agriculture. Fun facts, not the story that we're going to go into today, because that one's not Lake County related or real estate related, obviously. But I love Greek mythology in general, so that's what inspired the costume. Now, dressed as the goddess of the underworld, I felt like it would be fitting to tell you about the most haunted lake in California. That's right, it's Clearlake, believe it or not. And it makes sense. It's one of the oldest lakes in North America, so it's gotta have some dark history behind it, right? I am going to get more into other lore and dark history that surrounds the lake, but today I wanted to specialize mainly in the ghost stories that surround the lake. And this is just a few of them that I was able to find while making this video. There's a ton more out there. The amount of lore that surrounds this little county is just so fascinating, and I feel so blessed to be a part of it and having to grow up here. The more I dive into it and research, the more and more I found out about this area, and it's so cool. Like, I knew a lot before starting this series, but since starting this series, it's crazy the amount of ghost stories, for one, creature stories, like there are stories about Bigfoot that I'll get into in a later video, and other monsters and mythical creatures around here. Not only from the settlers, but from native lore. And it's really, really cool to learn about. And I really hope that I'll be able to bring all these stories to you guys one day. Because honestly, one of my favorite things is getting to share these stories with all of you. If you like videos like this, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more videos in the future. Now, let's get into ghost stories of Lake County. First, we have the Lady with the Lantern. This haunting is said to have started in the pioneer days. A man and woman had moved to Lake County in order to start a new life for themselves. One day, the man left his wife at home alone. Unfortunately, on this day, a group of outlaws broke into the house, robbed and killed the wife, throwing her body in a well that was nearby the lake. Since then, visitors to Clearlake say that they see a woman walking around the lakeshore holding a lantern, waiting in vain for her husband to return to her. And sometimes during a gentle night wind, you can hear the sound of what seems to be a fiddle. And they say that it's the woman playing music for her husband to follow it home. Next we have the Stonehouse ghosts. Now, Hidden Valley Lake's Stonehouse is rumored to be one of Lake County's oldest homes built. It was built, they estimate, in 1854, and over the years it has not been untouched by the supernatural. Members of the Stonehouse Historical Society saved the building from demolition in the 1980s, and they have reported encountering a ghost that smells like camphor, which was used as a liniment. Camphor, as they eventually dubbed the ghost, would swing lamps, remove Christmas decorations that she didn't like, and in general, she just liked making her presence known. Historical Society members told a reporter that a clairvoyant described Camphor to them as a small, stout woman, with her hair in a bun, wearing wire-rimmed glasses, and a long calico dress with an apron. The friendly ghosts may have been that of a woman who died in the house, but who the clairvoyant said was happy and welcomed the visitors. The next ghost story on our list is Myrtle at the Lakeport English Inn. Now, the Lakeport English Inn was built in 1875, and it is a gorgeous location to spend the night in, and reportedly a favorite stopping place for a ghost. One of the recent owners said that as she was restoring the inn's main house, she found a writing primer from the late 19th century that belonged to a girl named Myrtle Hobbs. They took the book to the Lake County Historical Society, who related that Hobbs lived her whole life in Lake County. As they continued adding and restoring the house, they ended up going underneath to look for treasures and found an envelope with an 1897 date addressed to Hobbs. The owner and many of the staff have reported strange things such as lights just flickering and doors closing randomly with no one around, and they jokingly contribute it to Myrtle Hobbs. Next, we have the Lower Lake Schoolhouse and Mrs. Lee. The Lower Lake Schoolhouse Museum was built in 1877 and once housed many school children. It was almost demolished, and finally they ended up renovating it to its present glory and turning it into a museum. The 144-year-old building is said to house its own spirit, which the spirit is believed to be responsible for the sound of footsteps sometimes heard traveling across the museum's restored Weaver Auditorium. One of the museum curators has reported hearing the ghost, who she calls Bella, walking from the auditorium's northeast to southeast corner. Bella is believed to be Mrs. Isabella Lee, according to the curator. Lee was the wife of a piano tuner who sometimes worked at the schoolhouse and whose tools are on display there. Isabella Lee died in 1967. Another museum worker encountered Bella in October of 1995. As the man was walking through the auditorium, he looked toward the piano and saw a music book sitting on the piano, close suddenly, and fall off the instrument. Someone saying, "Get the heck away from my piano." Now we have the graduation ghosts. The following story is written by Marilyn Ekus Johnson. Hopefully I pronounced the middle name right. I am horrible with words. I apologize. English is not my best language, though it's my only language. And excerpted from Malden's History of Lake County. In the good old days, school learning wasn't as easily acquired as it is today, or as lightly taken for granted. What's more, an 8th grade education was an occasion of importance in the Lower Lakes First Schoolhouse. They were children from a family who had recently migrated from Germany. In Germany, they had been peasants, working the land for a family of the aristocracy. In their native village, only the priest, the doctor, and the burgomaster had been able to read. One of the dreams of the grandmother of the family had been that all of her children be able to read and write. After coming to live in the United States, she had to a certain extent achieved her ambition. Her children were educated to the point that they could read and write, but none of them, as yet, achieved the dignity of any kind of diploma. You can imagine her joy when her daughter, who lived in one of the pioneer homes in Lower Lake, sent word that their eldest girl, her granddaughter, was to receive her certificate of graduation from the 8th grade. Even though the old woman was far from well, she was determined to witness this great event. And so that she would not disgrace her family, she took her best gray shawl and knit a fringed border of black upon it to dress it up. The idea that the old woman would come to the graduation was debated back and forth by all members of the family. They wanted her to go, but she was old and in poor health, and travel in those days was trying to even a young person. Nevertheless, she prevailed and set out one morning by stagecoach. Her precious shawl was tucked inside a suitcase for safekeeping. It was hot that day, and the graduation exercises were held outside the school grounds in the shade of some big trees. The event was well attended. People sat on makeshift benches while they listened to the speeches. On trestle tables at one side, the boards groaned with homemade pickles, jams, cakes, fried chicken, pies, salads, fancy breads, plain breads, baked hams, and mounds of cold sliced beef. One of the neighbors, a close friend of the family, was delighted to see them seated to one side with a little white-haired lady in a gray shawl trimmed in black. After the ceremony, she went over and said, "Well, I see your mother made it." The mother of the family shook her head. "No, she didn't. We received word this morning. My mother became very ill, and they reached the toll house at the top of the mountain, and she died there. I haven't told my daughter yet, so as not to ruin the day for her." "Then who was that old lady sitting with you?" the neighbor asked. "I don't know." The woman wiped a tear away. "I don't remember any little old lady, but then I might not have noticed." Her friend nodded, accepting the explanation, until 3 days later when she attended the funeral of her friend's mother. There, tucked inside the wooden casket, was the little white-haired lady she had seen at the graduation, wearing a gray shawl trimmed in black fringe. It was the old European peasant woman who had been determined no matter what to witness the 8th grade graduation of her granddaughter. This next story, not so sweet. This is the story of Lakeport's not-so-friendly ghost. A story told by Packy Steadwell of her encounter with a ghost in Lakeport is a more frightening tale. Steadwell and her family moved to Lake County in 1972 and purchased an old Victorian church on North Forbes Street, which in recent years has been fully restored. As the family prepared to turn the church into a commercial space, it had been desanctified years before. They began finding out the unusual history of the church, which was finally constructed in 1888 after the building's first 2 frames were burned down. There was also the story of a man who fell while painting the steeple and died. Working on the building late that night, Steadwell's husband heard footsteps across the ceiling and pounding on the attic wall. Weeks later, the couple was awakened by a crash upstairs, but found nothing there. They started to talk about a ghost, and they called Elijah. Other people familiar with the church also shared stories of hearing the spirit pounding in the attic near the belfry. Early one Halloween morning, Steadwell, who was staying with her family in the building, was awakened by a loud knock at her door. The ghost had come downstairs after having been confined to the attic and other upstairs regions. As she tried to go back to sleep, she happened to look into the living room. There, shimmering on one of the walls, was a translucent mass of white, slowly opening and closing its mouth. I must have stared at it, frozen with terror, for fully 3 or 4 seconds. I shut my eyes and shook my head. When I looked again, Elijah was gone. I decided I definitely did not like him. He was not friendly. All he was trying to do was give me a head of white hair. Within minutes, Steadwell heard breathing and creaking floorboards outside her bedroom. She finally jumped up and ran to the door, opened it, and yelled, "Okay, what the do you want? Come on, you're such a brave one, show yourself!" That seemed to do the trick, and the sound stopped. Kicks were called upon in order to help Steadwell find the ghost. They said that this ghost in particular died of natural causes 150 years earlier, long before the church was constructed. The psychics also helped Elijah move on to the next world, according to Steadwell's account. Have any of you heard of one of our more unique hotel stays? It's the Featherbed Railroad. Now, the Featherbed Railroad has quite a few ghost stories of its own. And these accounts are told by one of the old owners, June Bajar. The ghosts of the cabooses seem to be more into causing mischief rather than creating mayhem. Bajar speculates that the hauntings may be from the ghosts of the owners of the B&B. I think there might be a traveling ghost on the property, Bajar said, one that can move from caboose to caboose. While much of the ghostly mischief happens when people are not watching, there are reports of actual sightings. Some people have reported seeing apparitions, Bajar said. Some of these have been of a man in a striped suit. Strange occurrences in the caboose include lights going on or off, items being moved or rearranged, the sound of an invisible someone walking up the caboose steps late at night, and windows opening and closing on their own. Ghosts seem to be able to work their best with the electronics. Lights, TVs, radios, and cell phones, Bajar said. Sometimes the ghosts get a little personal with guests. Recently, a couple reported they felt someone sit on their bed in the middle of the night, even though there was no one else in the room. Staff as well as guests have strange encounters in the cabooses. Housekeepers often hear somebody whispering in their ears even though they're the only ones in the room. Once a housekeeper went into the room with the television muted. Suddenly, the TV went full blast volume and changed the channels on its own. Bashar says she's personally had a few encounters with these ghosts. Bashar, who typically sleeps with earplugs, left her bedroom in the main house with her earplugs on top of her dresser. When she returned, just within a few minutes, the earplugs were neatly arranged in a stack. She also states sometimes she sees movement out of the corner of her eye or hears a strange sound, but never feels threatened or like she's being watched. I actually have a couple of ghost stories of my own. These could just all be coincidences, but I still think that they're kind of interesting stories, and yes, they happen here in Lake County for the most part. At one point, I was staying in a place that had other families. Each of us kind of had our own room with a attached bathroom to it. And in this place, it was a mix of people and their kids. One day, this strange woman came to stay at the property. She was definitely rather odd, to say the least. There was something just majorly off with her, and everyone saw it, but we still welcomed her. Things got increasingly weird. She would often talk to herself in what sounded kind of like a Latin language. Then one day she ended up having a psychotic break. She drew all over the walls, the furniture, and what looked like glyphs, all the while speaking in that other language. I still have no idea what it was. It could have been gibberish. I have no idea what she was saying, but something that she did say in English was, God is dead, over and over. She ended up having to be placed elsewhere. After she left, though, that's when the really weird stuff started to happen. A new family moved into her room, and they, like I said, had their own bathroom. But in their unit, the first night they were in there, the water turned red. I mean, it could be iron in the pipes possibly, but it was weird because all the pipes are technically connected, and this was the only one where the water would turn red. Next, the adult in the room ended up waking up with bruises and scratches all over her. Again, really weird, but if you're an active sleeper, it can happen. But the craziest thing is, one night she woke up and she felt like someone was on top of her, choking her. That family left and another family moved in. The same thing started happening to them. And what was weird is these families, they did not speak to each other. The weirdest part of this whole experience, though, was the kids that they had both spoke of an imaginary friend named Freddy. Nightmare on Elm Street? Did they watch Nightmare on Elm Street? Because apparently not. I had asked them if they had, and they said they hadn't, but I'm not sure what the resolution of this haunting was, or what exactly it was that had all this happen, because I ended up leaving, but definitely an interesting story. It could all just be coincidence, but definitely interesting. Now that's enough of the darker stories. I wanted to leave this video off on a lighter note, but still a ghost story. Though it is sad, it's definitely sweet. So when I was a little girl, I was in a really tough situation. When things were difficult, I had this imaginary friend that I would talk to and play with. She made things a lot easier. She had pale skin like me, with blue eyes, and kind of a dark strawberryish blonde hair that was very curly. She said her name was Mona Lisa, and she would call me her sister. After the tough situation, I ended up going and living with my grandparents. And I told my grandmother about my imaginary friend. I described her in detail, and I told her the girl's name was Mona Lisa. My grandmother, she turned white. She went into the back of the house and pulled out a picture and brought it to me. Is this her? I held the picture in my hands, and there was my imaginary friend. Same little girl, curly hair, blue eyes, same smile. It was their daughter that had passed away when she was a little girl of leukemia, long before I was born. They never talked about her because it was just too painful. I had never heard them speak of her before this situation happened. and they were still mourning her death very, very much every day. That night, I ended up having a dream about Mona Lisa. She said, "Mom and Dad are still mourning my death, but I want them to remember my life. I want them to celebrate my birthday as they did before." I told my grandmother this the next morning. Mona Lisa's birthday was only maybe a week or two away. On Mona's birthday, she ended up going to the store and looking for a cake. She bought a cake that seemed to smile at her no matter where she was at in the bakery department. After she got the cake, then she went over to find flowers. She wanted to find some flowers that particularly had purple lupins in them. And she was looking through all the different bouquets and couldn't find any with purple lupins. She looks and there's one bouquet of flowers that's wrapped in happy face paper wrapping. She takes it down and there's purple lupins. She comes home and my grandpa tells her, "I've been working in the shop all day and for some reason there's this blue dragonfly that keeps fluttering in my face every time I work." As my grandmother is telling him that it's Mona's birthday, blue dragonfly comes down and starts flying around the both of them. For the first time in many, many, many years, they celebrated their daughter's birthday. Ever since then, on her birthday, we see blue dragonflies, and when we've had difficult events happen in our family, we see blue dragonflies everywhere. It's the most amazing thing, and they've celebrated it every year since. My grandparents ended up adopting me and becoming my parents. So when Mona was saying that she was my sister, she wasn't my sister yet. She was just my aunt. But my grandparents, they've raised me off and on throughout my life. So when I reference my parents, that's who I'm talking about. They've been my parents officially since I was 7, but they've taken care of me pretty much all my life. Could be an active imagination of a little girl who just happened to mimic a deceased relative? Maybe. This event happened between the times I was 4 to 6 years old, the time most kids have imaginary friends. Either way, it helped my family heal, and it was really magical looking back. That's all the time that I have today. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more history, stories, and real estate information on Lake County. Until next time, have a good one, guys.